Psycho was directed by Alfred Hitchcock and stars Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins and is one of the most influential horror films ever made. When this film came out, it shocked the entire world, but a lot of people didn't have confidence in it when it was in production. Hitchcock was so enthusiastic about this film that he didn't take his normal salary and chose to take some earnings from the potential box office gross. And since Paramount didn't have much confidence in this film, they said that'd be okay, and Alfred Hitchcock ended up making
millions on this movie.
It kind of reminds me of what went on with George Lucas
in 20th Century Fox with Star Wars.
Them just
giving him the merchandising rights
because hey, who cares? The marketing of this film is legendary. There was a 6-minute trailer with Alfred Hitchcock
himself in it that didn't show a
single shot from the movie, and it just had him touring the locations they shot, building anticipation for this masterpiece he was crafting at the time.
This motel also has, as an adjunct, an old house, which is, if I may say so, a little more sinister looking.
He had the theaters follow strict rules in which no one was allowed to be admitted into the film if they were late, and he begged audiences to not share the film's final twist, which of course I'm going to get into spoilers. If you somehow have never seen Psycho or at least don't know of the ending of Psycho, we are going to discuss that. Psycho is one of my favorite movies. It's always something that I am drawn to. Remote locations where something dark is happening, where you don't feel like there's any protection. The police are far away. Phone calls are far away. Help is far away. And this is a perfect setting for what takes place in this film, which is about a woman named Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, who embezzles $40,000 from her employer and goes on the run. She checks into the now famed Bates Motel and meets Norman Bates, the young son who is traumatized by his mother. He seems as if he's almost on a leash from her, despite being an adult man. She has him fully under her control, and this is very telling in a scene in which he says, "A boy's best friend is his mother," which is one of the most famous lines in the film. Now, what's so unique about Norman Bates is that he's not like the way killers are often portrayed in films. Unattractive loners who have no idea how to converse with anyone. On the contrary, Anthony Perkins is extremely handsome and charming in this film. And that's something Alfred Hitchcock wanted for this character. He wanted the character to seem like a very likable person, like the audience could relate to him or understand him and get behind him, because for a lot of this film, if you've never seen it before, you're thinking, man, this poor guy, he's under the control of this harsh disciplinarian of a mother, and she's out there killing people, because of course we get the classic shower scene, which, you know, people have talked about to death. There's an entire documentary about the shower scene alone. So there's really not much more I can say beyond the fact that still today it's extremely effective, especially with Bernard Herrmann's chilling theme, which is still one of my favorite scores ever.
And I remember the first
time that I saw Psycho, I was concerned about Norman Bates and his character. I felt like, man, what a horrible predicament to be in.
You have to cover up for your mother and her insane actions, and all these things that she may do. On top of that, you're trying to run a business, and she keeps killing all the fucking clients. Nice going, Mom.
But speaking of the first time I saw Psycho, I was probably way too young. But my mother was very trusting, and she sat me down in front of the TV, and it was on television, so it was partially edited for content, I'm assuming. And I sat there with my older sister and my mom. I must have been 6 or 7 years old, and I was entranced. I still actually have the visual of Mother and her skeleton turning around in that seat, and the light shining, making the shadows shift around her skull. That was horrifying, but I adored it. My older sister, however, she left and ran to the kitchen. I'll never forget that. I sat there, elementary schooler, transfixed by this film, and ever since, it's been something that's always inspired me. As I said, I'm drawn to stories like this. I'm very enticed by films and or stories that have these remote locales in a rural area, in the middle of nowhere, where something horrible is happening behind the scenes. And the way Hitchcock builds the suspense in this film and subverts our expectations is unparalleled. Whenever a film does something, and now no film after it can ever do that exact thing again without being compared to it, you know you have a classic on your hands. All slasher films after Psycho owe a debt to that film.
Not just necessarily because of the story,
but the fact that this film happened and allowed it to be part of public consciousness. This gave filmmakers more reign. People like John Carpenter could make Halloween without being as concerned about being so shocking or a studio not funding it, because Psycho was immensely successful, and because of that success, it opened up the door for other filmmakers to tell more darkly disturbing and violent tales. And nowadays you go back and you watch Psycho, and some of the violence is almost tame. Much of it is off-screen, and a lot of it is sound effects. And this is why I've said in these videos I've made for almost 10 years now that violence is not what scares me. Gore isn't what scares me. It's the suggestion. It's how our brains fill in the gaps of the things we're not seeing. That's scary because our imaginations are far more scary than anything a filmmaker can show us. And that's what Hitchcock understood. In regards to not being able to do something after a film like Psycho has done it, any film in which our lead character dies halfway through and we meet a new lead character, they will always be compared to Psycho. In fact, I've seen many filmmakers who have tried to do that and have said, I was inspired by Psycho to try this. This film didn't just have a shocking twist ending and violent murder scenes. It told a story in a very unique way, in a way that audiences hadn't seen at the time, in a way that today, in 2018, we still don't see that often. And it did it with so few things. We have a very sparse amount of characters, a small amount of locations, only a few death scenes. This film doesn't have that much violence or nudity to cut to. What we have instead is the horrifying suggestion of what goes on behind closed doors.
The only time that I think this film slips, and I'm not going to downgrade it for it because I understand that at the time
Hitchcock probably thought it was necessary, is when the doctor comes out at the end and basically explains the twist ending to us, the audience.
He's telling the main characters that Norman Bates has a split personality and he's been acting like his mother. And we get that incredibly famous shot towards the end where his face dissolves into a skull for a split second there. And some people even think that the chain in the dissolve of the car being raised out of the swamp is in some way linking the two personalities together, which that could be a bit of a stretch, and I do find it interesting to think about things like that. That's really the only time the film slips up for me. It's just a lot of explaining. I understand though, for audiences at the time, Hitchcock was concerned that they wouldn't get it. But I do wish that he had trusted them a little more. Nevertheless, Psycho remains incredibly influential and still very thrilling and very scary today. And it's not for any of the reasons you're expecting it to if you've never seen Psycho.
This film isn't scary to me because there's this startling shower sequence.
As I said, it's more frightening because it suggests things about people that we don't normally pay attention to. The receptionist at the hotel. What's he doing in his house behind closed doors? I love things like that. And Psycho continues to be thrilling to this day.
I'm going to give it an A+.
Guys, thank you so much for continuing to watch my series of pre-1970s reviews. This has always been one I've loved, and I was excited to share my thoughts on it with you. Thank you once again, you're the best, and as always, if you like this, you can click right here and get